Hey everyone, me Kevin here. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer just spent a good chunk of time holding a press conference talking about what's next for stimulus and where their position currently stands, especially in the lame duck. What are their demands for more stimulus? What's their position? Well, I guess I shouldn't even ask what their position is on the election because I'm sure you can only imagine what their position is on the election, which I suppose this is a good place to say. Remember that my goal on this channel is to provide financial information that changes or impacts your wealth. So I'm not going to pick a side, left or right. So I'm sorry I can't super defend the right. I can't super defend the left. And that's just the nature of this channel. So if you appreciate that, let's just get into the content. Let's see. I cut this down. So this is not the full video, but I cut this down to essentially the highlight parts. And a lot of the things that were said here are pretty important. So we'll talk about this. If Mitch McConnell had a video like this or a press conference like this, obviously we'd be covering it as well. Do keep in mind that you could still get 3 totally free stocks with Webull. You deposit $100, they give you 3 free stocks worth up to $1,600. Link for that is down below. Great dashboard. You could trade after hours and everything. It's right next to the link for life insurance you can get in as little as 5 minutes. Let's get started.
Addressing the crisis, the pandemic. If we do so scientifically, we will be able to open our economy, we'll be able to open our schools safely. We're able to do so in a way that recognizes the tragedy that has befallen us in our country.
Now, keep in mind, this has been a very big difference between Democrats and Republicans. And essentially, you've got Democrats saying, hey, look, we've got to throw as much money as possible at this virus that we can. On the flip side, you've got about 30% of Republicans that don't believe in the pandemic enough to say that we should go into substantial debt. So you've got more of that sort of fiscal conservativeness. And that's where we're seeing this big sort of headbutting between the two sides.
Because of the Republican denial of science and disdain for governance. So stop the circus and get to work on what really matters to the American people, their health and their economic security.
AKA economic relief, stimulus relief, and that. No, I want you, as we listen to Chuck Schumer here, and Nancy Pelosi is going to come back and talk some more as well, what I want you to think is, how easy is it going to be for someone like Nancy Pelosi, the way she's saying, let's stop the circus here, and what Chuck Schumer is about to say, how easy is it for them to actually strike a deal with somebody like Mitch McConnell? They are so radically far apart on their views regarding this virus. It's very, very challenging. Let's hear what Chuck Schumer says.
Republicans, stop denying reality. Stop deliberately and recklessly sowing doubt about our democratic process. And start focusing on COVID. All over the country, legal claims by the president and his Republican allies are being laughed out of court. The New York Times called election officials from both parties in every state in the country. Not one, reported any evidence of fraud or irregularities.
By the way, I'm just going to jump in here. See, his mask, not so good. It keeps falling off his face. Like, that defeats the purpose, okay? Not a good mask. Actually, when we see Nancy Pelosi in a moment again here, when we start answering questions about stimulus, Nancy Pelosi is doubled up. She's got what could potentially be an N95 under her cover mask.
These frivolous lawsuits have less than a snowball's chance in hell of succeeding.
And this is a big statement here, right? Like, this is where we say, you've got Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi bagging so hardcore on Republicans, saying there's no evidence, this is all fruitless, this is a waste of time, we should be focusing on COVID instead. It almost, to me, emboldens the differences between the two sides. It makes it very difficult to see, how are these people going to come together? How's Joe Biden going to pull these people together? How's Trump going to pull these together? Tough.
So let me speak directly to my Republican colleagues in the Senate. Once again, Joe Biden has won. Now move on and work with us to solve the COVID crisis. Let us bring the country together and get things done. Every day, as the speaker mentioned, hundreds of thousands are getting sick. Thousands are dying. We don't have time for these kinds of games. The American people are waiting for relief from the COVID virus. But Republicans refuse to take comprehensive action that meets the needs of the country. The HEROES Act, passed in the House, does meet this moment. It doesn't pick and choose who we're going to help during the greatest health and economic crises in decades. It's laser focused on health care issues that are at the heart of this pandemic. The heroes.
Now, in fairness here, I do have to say, the HEROES Act is a little less than laser focused. The HEROES Act is huge. So here is the HEROES Act, and look at this. We got $600 a week in unemployment, going back retroactively, $1,200 stimulus checks, $500 for children. We got PPP funding, we got food aid, we got rural aid, we got housing aid, we got state and local relief, we got tribal relief, territory relief, FDA, USPTO, that's the trademark office, prison relief, Violence Against Women's Act in here, juvenile justice, and I'm skipping here, and I'm still rolling off the list here. FEMA, Fish and Wildlife, EPA grants, Bureau of Indian Affairs, these are all line items that are getting billions of dollars. Look at this. National Endowment for the Arts, $135 million. National Endowment for the Humanities, $135 million. Department of Labor, $3.7 billion. Department of Interior, $1 billion. Bureau of Indian Affairs was $900 million. So you see, it's like, okay, here's CDC and HHS. They're getting a chunk of money. But yeah, I mean, Capitol Police, $12 million. There is a ton of money flowing in this bill. Amtrak, USPS, FAA, broadband money is in here. COVID aid is in here. Small business aid, the EIDL grants are in here. There is so much in this bill. This bill is absolutely huge. So it's no wonder you got fiscally conservative Republicans looking at this going, whew, holy crap. And quite frankly, they're probably not looking at this beautiful spreadsheet or concept map I put together, laying this all out for them. Instead, here you go. Here's your 1,800-page bill. It's like, oh, yeah. And how much is it? Oh, $2.4 trillion. Wow, that sounds like a lot. It just seems like there's this massive communication issue where if they could just put it all on a list and line item these things, we could get a deal done. But let's see what they say in Q&A here in regards to getting a deal done.
Act does something that's vital. It strengthens Medicaid and improves access to health care coverage, support for hospitals. At a time when COVID is raging, health care money, Medicaid expansion should be at the very top of the list. These are the issues we should be discussing and debating. And the HEROES Act should be the starting point, not an emaciated bill that prioritizes protections for corporations and considers the needs of American families as an afterthought.
And remember, this is obviously the skinny bill that we've talked about before. The skinny bill does not include stimulus checks. The HEROES Act does. The skinny bill doesn't include like almost any of those line items. I mean, it's literally basically PPP money, unemployment pay, and liability protections. That's essentially it. Like, there's no money for state and local in there, right? Huge differences between the desires here of Republicans and Democrats. And this is why you have Democrats saying, like, hey, why is it that, we're trying to help everybody and y'all are just trying to pick a few sectors and calling it a day? It's tough. Big difference here.
Every day that goes by without the Republican Party acknowledging and accepting the results of this election is another day Americans' faith in their wonderful democracy declines. The longer Senate Republicans play the sad game is the longer they are denying working families much-needed relief from the COVID health and economic crises.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Yes, indeed, the HEROES Act has now for nearly 6 months been a formula for crushing the virus, for honoring our heroes, our healthcare workers, our police and fire, our first responders, our teachers, our sanitation, transport.
This, by the way, her list, that she mentions this frequently, but it's actually very important to her. She frequently says, look, she believes her mandate is providing relief for teachers and firefighters. And this is why state and local government funding is so important to her. Republicans say, hey, look, we don't want to bail out poorly managed blue states. Democrats say, hey, look, we'll put some verbiage in that says we don't bail out, pension funds or whatever. Well, then you have Republicans that say, but the fact is the actual cost of state and local pay due to COVID would only be around $300 billion. Let's do that. Nancy Pelosi says, no, I need $417 billion because I need more money going forward because I know we're going to run it, like that money's already been spent, but we need to have money in the box or sort of in the bank for the additional expenses coming up. So see, it's like, oh, come on. It just seems so close. yet so far apart.
Food workers, people who make our economy and our society work. As I said earlier, over 1 million teachers have already lost their jobs since last year. We need to help our state and local government. They say from time to time that they want to do that, but we haven't seen that evidence. Secondly, and this is almost sinful, crushing the virus is essential. At the time of a pandemic, instead of crushing the virus, they want to crush the Affordable Care Act, as was demonstrated in the Supreme Court the other day. And a very important point, among many others, that the leader made about the expansion of Medicaid. So it's hard to, what are they thinking? Or am I using the word thinking loosely?
Is it fair to say your position on...
It's tough. It's so inflammatory, right? Like, how are they supposed to negotiate? Good question here. Let's listen to this question.
The coronavirus relief has not changed since where it was before the election. Is that a fair characterization?
So to reiterate, he's asking, has your position on COVID relief changed since before the election?
Your position on where you are in coronavirus, has that not changed since before the election? Is that
It
fair?
has been our position all along to crush the virus, honor our heroes, put money in the pockets of the American people. But you have the administration saying, well, we have just made a light touch on their language on testing. No, 55% of the language, which addressed what we were trying to do for people of communities of color. So, yeah, no, we're at that same place, even more so with the pandemic, because...
Okay, so that's important, what she just said. Here you go. You've got a big no on the $1.9 trillion deal that Treasury Secretary Mnuchin offered up and the White House offered up a couple of weeks ago. And now we've got Mitch McConnell in charge of negotiations. He's suggesting, hey, you know what? I'm interested in doing maybe a $1 trillion deal. So, like, the offer's just gotten more apart, which is not good in a negotiation. And when asked if Nancy Pelosi's position has changed now that essentially she's lost some clout because Democrats didn't win as much as she thought they would, does that mean she might be open to a smaller relief package? And the answer is no. She believes that, hey, she has a mandate to do an even larger one now because cases are going up.
Look at these numbers. Look at these numbers. Look at the predictions from the scientific community. You know, I've come before you over and over again. Some weeks ago with Frank Pallone saying, this is what we put in the HEROES Act to crush the virus. Why won't they do it? They were in their herd mentality, herd immunity mood then.
And I would just add one more thing. One more thing. Given how COVID is raging, the number of hospitalizations, the number of deaths is increased. It makes the health care provisions in the HEROES Act even more important and more vital that they be included.
You know, you both call it for the passage of the HEROES Act. It doesn't seem like there's any more of a path to get to 60 votes in the Senate to get closer there. And
So in other words, so far, even Chuck Schumer reiterates, look, as cases get worse, we need even more than what we have essentially in the HEROES Act, but at least what we have in the HEROES Act. Now they're being asked, okay, well, how are you going to get to 60 votes in the Senate? Like, how are you actually going to be able to get something like this done?
and floor here, it seems as though in the House, your position on the larger bill, you would have a weaker hand to play in the lame duck Congress. If that's not the case, tell me why it's not.
Well, I think that the most compelling argument are what I said earlier. 144,000 people yesterday. And these people are spread all over the country. The pressure on hospitals all over the country, including in rural areas. So if the Republicans want to be cold-hearted and say they don't care, or as the president's son said, 225,000, I think at that time, that's no big number kind of thing. No, every single one of those deaths is important to us. We carry those people in our hearts. And they should be carrying them on their conscience for what they did not do. Since we passed the bill, the HEROES Act, over 100,000 more people have died. That could have been prevented. So
this, by the way, is kind of a new strategy that Nancy Pelosi has been going with. She's been taking this new position that, hey, look, we passed this HEROES Act in May. That could have helped us get testing, tracing, treatment, vaccines, everything moving faster. And therefore, because Republicans were holding it up, everything that has happened in between is basically Republicans' fault. It's tough to see a compromise coming here. We'll see.
Again, you've heard me say it a million times, Chad. Public sentiment is everything. And now that the people have expressed their views, Joe Biden has won. Kamala Harris will be the first woman vice president of the United States. So I said to them, if we didn't have masks last week, they could see us beaming with that success. What they have been proposing is very similar to what we have in the HEROES Act, and we just have to...
Okay, so she just said that what Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have been proposing is very similar to what's in the HEROES Act. She's essentially saying, hey, look, we have an alignment here. But potentially, if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are officially in, then maybe this rebranding, who knows, if Joe and Kamala rebrand this and this doesn't end up getting passed as the HEROES Act, maybe that is going to be what ends up getting this deal done, is some sort of rebranding and starting over.
To make sure that if the Republicans decide that they don't care about the health and well-being, about Medicaid and what it means to people in their lives, that the public will know.
And I would just say one more thing, Chad, one more thing. First, McConnell is sticking to his emaciated bill, which he's tried twice and didn't get a Republican vote. That's sort of a non-starter. And then he said, because we have a vaccine, there's even less need for a bill. Vaccine makes greater need for a bill because it has to be distributed fairly and equitably, and there needs to be education that it's healthy and everything else. Second, the biggest change since...
That's actually an interesting statement there. He just basically said, look, once we have a vaccine, we need to spend a crap ton of marketing money making sure people are educated that, hey, like, the vaccine's safe, like, please take the vaccine. Interesting.
Election day is that Donald Trump, who was not for helping us in COVID and who was against the HEROES bill, has lost. That was an overwhelming referendum by the American people.
Obviously, Republicans would say, hey, it wasn't overwhelming. It wasn't the landslide y'all were expecting, and it ain't over yet.
So yes, we think there has been change. It should move things in our direction. We're willing to sit down and talk. They haven't wanted to talk.
Consider that for a moment. As the virus gets worse, they're saying, hey, we need a bigger package. It's moving things in our direction. It's tough for negotiating.
Up to their position.
You don't
say that what Joe Biden got in this election was a mandate to address the challenges that our country faces, as well as to have a positive initiative on how to grow the economy in a fair way. And in order to do that, we must address the COVID, the pandemic.
This election was maybe more a referendum on who can handle COVID well than anything else. The Donald Trump approach was repudiated. The Joe Biden approach was embraced. And that's why we think there's a better chance to get a bill in the lame duck. If only the Republicans would stop embracing the ridiculous shenanigans that Trump is forcing them to do, that this, in the election, and focus on what people need.
Wow. Okay, so we've learned a few things here. One, we've learned that the Joe Biden plan and Kamala plan is close to what Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are proposing via the HEROES Act. We've also learned that Democrats feel emboldened. Even though they didn't win with that massive landslide they were expecting, they feel emboldened that, you know what, society has said we want a larger COVID relief plan. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. It'll be interesting to see if we do end up with a rebranded bill. So let's stay tuned for that. But this is the update in the meantime, directly from the horse's mouth. Thank you so much for watching. If you appreciate this sort of impartial video style of reporting, it's not super left, it's not super right, it's in the middle as much as possible, consider subscribing. It's pretty rare to see this, usually because sensationalized far left for far right does way better in this landscape. So I do try to stay in the middle, though, because, again, my goal is making you money. Check out those courses, by the way, on making you money down below. And you get this amazing coupon code for Black Friday month. And thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.